Gustavus, aka Gustav, or the Lion of the North as he would also be called, is credited for the rise of Sweden as a great European power. He was assisted in his efforts by Count Axel Oxenstierna. During his reign, Sweden became one of the primary military forces in Europe during the 30 Years' War, helping to determine the political and religious balance of power in Europe. He is often regarded as one of the greatest military commanders in modern history. Future commanders who studied and admired Gustav include Napoleon I of France, who would also have a somewhat connection to the Swedish throne later during the 19th century. Coming to the throne at the age of 16, Gustav inherited 3 wars from his father Charles IX. A lot of conflicts, so listen up carefully. Of these, the Danish War was the most serious, even though he had a dynastic struggle with his first cousin, King Sigismund III Vasa of Poland, who wanted to regain the throne of Sweden and tried to force Gustav to renounce the title. The war against Denmark Norway was concluded in 1613 with a peace that did not cost Sweden any territory, but was forced to pay a heavy indemnity to Denmark Norway and secured that Sweden regained control over the Elfsborg castle, which was crucial to the trade on the east coast. The war against Russia, the Ingrian War, ended in 1617, which excluded Russia from the Baltic Sea. In 1618, the 30 Years' War was largely waged within the Holy Roman Empire. One of the most destructive wars in European history, it caused an estimated 4.5 to 8 million deaths. Since Gustav of Sweden also held territories within the empire, he joined the fighting at various intervals. The final inherited war, the war against Poland, ended in 1629, which transferred the large province Livonia to Sweden. In June 1630, Gustav landed in Germany, marking the Swedish intervention in the 30 Years' War. The Battle of Lutzen in the 30 Years' War in 1632 was one of the most decisive battles of the war. It was a Protestant victory, but the Protestant alliance lost one of its most important leaders, which caused the Protestant campaign to lose direction. Gustav was killed at a crucial point in the battle, when he became separated from his troops while leading a cavalry charge on his wing. Gustav and Maria Eleonora of Brandenburg, married in 1620, had a daughter, Christina, who inherited the throne. This was possible due to that Charles IX had established female inheritance law in 1604. Christina was almost only 6 years old by the time she became Queen of Sweden. Until her declaration of majority at 18, a regency council ruled Sweden. This council was headed by Axel Oxenstierna. His opinion was that Sweden should remain in the war in Germany to ensure compensation for the sacrifices made. Christina would receive an education of the type normally only afforded to boys. She is remembered as one of the most learned women of the 17th century and learned at least 7 other languages than Swedish. She seemed happy to study 10 hours a day. In May 1643, the Swedish Privy Council decided to attack Denmark. The purpose was, among other things, to gain territories from Denmark. The war ended in 1645 with Sweden gaining the Isles of Gotland and Osel from Denmark, while Norway lost the districts of Jämtland and Härjedalen to her. She reached her majority in 1644, and Oxenstierna soon discovered that her political views differed from his own. In 1648, the 30 Years' War ended, effectively ending the European wars of religion. A year later, Christina tried to reduce the influence of Oxenstierna. She announced that she had decided not to marry, and instead she declared her cousin Charles Gustaf as her heir presumptive. In 1651, Christina lost much of her popularity after the beheading of Arnold Johan Messenius, together with his 17-year-old son, who had accused her of serious misbehavior. 3 years later, in 1654, she revealed to the council that she wanted to abdicate. Oxenstierna at first opposed this, but changed his mind and gave Christina the help she needed to go through with her abdication. In the summer of 1654, Christina left Sweden, and later that year, she converted to the Catholic faith but did not go public about it. In late 1655, she announced her conversion to Catholicism and headed to Italy. She revisited Sweden in 1660, and returned to Rome in 1668, where she would remain until her death in 1689. Charles X Gustaf was crowned the day after Christina abdicated in 1654, and his short reign was marked with war. Later that year he married Hedwig Eleonora, the daughter of Frederick III, Duke of Holstein-Gottorp, as he was hoping to secure a future ally against Denmark. With her, he had only one legitimate child, his successor Charles XI. The Riksdag, which assembled at Stockholm in 1655, duly considered the two great pressing national questions, war, and the restitution of the alienated crown lands. Later that year, Charles left Sweden to engage in a war against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, with his chief objective to conquest of Prussia. The campaign was mostly successful. In 1656, Russia declared war on Sweden and pursued a campaign in Livonia. In 1657, Charles's position in Poland was undermined. His ally of Brandenburg changed sides by signing a peace treaty with Poland, the Russian campaign in Livonia, and Denmark's declaration of war on Sweden in June. The Danish War declaration provided an opportunity for Charles to abandon the now unfortunate Polish-Lithuanian battlefields. Charles and his advisors sought a suitable solution to the Polish conflict. A quick victory over Denmark would strengthen Sweden's position and hopefully dissuade other powers, mainly Austria, from deeper involvement in the Polish conflict. The victory was indeed achieved quickly, and the peace was signed in February in 1658. The result was a disaster for Denmark, which was forced to cede the provinces of Blekinge, Bornholm, Bohuslän, Scania and Trondelag, as well as heavy war reparations to the Swedish state, Danish renunciation of all anti-Swedish alliances, and Danish provision of troops and warships to serve Charles. In January 1660, Charles fell ill, and he died in February, at the age of 37. With Charles X dead, a peace treaty was signed to end the war with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and Russia in 1660. Charles XI of Sweden was only 6 years old when Charles X died. He had earlier appointed a minor regency led by Queen Hedwig Eleonora to reign until Charles XI came of age. The new king appeared almost illiterate. His main difficulties are today seen as evident signs of dyslexia. The king was considered poorly educated, and he was dependent on his mother and advisors to interact with the foreign envoys, since he had no foreign language skills apart from German and was ignorant of the world outside Sweden. Sweden was going through financial problems at this time. Charles XI's guardians decided to negotiate an alliance with France in 1671. This would ensure that Sweden would not be isolated if there was a war, and that the national finances would improve thanks to French subsidies. Charles took the throne, as he came of age, in 1672. France directed its aggression against the Dutch the same year, and in 1674, Sweden was forced to take part by directing forces towards Brandenburg. In 1675, Charles got engaged to the Danish princess Ulrika Eleonora, a mere political engagement. The same year, after a Swedish defeat in the war against Brandenburg, Denmark declared war on Sweden. Charles defeated Denmark in the Battle of Lund in 1676, the bloodiest engagement ever in Swedish history. The battles continued, and peace was signed in 1679 with both Denmark and Brandenburg. Charles devoted the rest of his life to avoiding further warfare and tried to stabilize the economy, reorganize the military, and he established absolute monarchy in Sweden. The pro-Danish guerrilla, called Snap-Honorna, caused much trouble for Charles. They had attacked his soldiers and stolen his money. A ruthless campaign was waged by the Swedish army, compelling all Scanian peasants to swear allegiance to the King of Sweden. If they did not, they were usually executed and their corpses impaled and shown where the locals could see them and be intimidated into obedience. A common method of execution was the breaking wheel. The marriage with Ulrika Eleonora in 1680 produced 7 children, of whom only 3 outlived Charles. The many childbirths eventually broke her, and she died in 1693. Charles XI died in 1697 after having developed cancer. After a 7-month caretaker government, Charles XII assumed power at the age of 15 in 1697. As the Swedish Empire was unaligned and ruled by a young and inexperienced king, a triple alliance of Denmark Norway, Saxony, Poland, Lithuania and Russia launched an attack on the Swedish protectorate of Holstein-Gottorp, provinces of Livonia, and Ingria, thus initiating the Great Northern War in the year 1700. Charles's first campaign was against Denmark Norway. Having forced Denmark Norway to make peace within months, King Charles turned his attention upon the 2 other powerful neighbors, King August II, King of Poland-Lithuania, and Peter the Great of Russia. Leading the Swedish army against the alliance, Charles won multiple victories despite being usually significantly outnumbered. One of the greatest victories ever came at the Battle of Narva in November 1700. The total number of Russian fatalities reached about 10,000 at the end of the battle, while the Swedish forces lost 667 men. Peter the Great sued for peace, an offer that Charles subsequently rejected. Charles did not pursue the Russian army. Instead, he turned against Poland-Lithuania. Charles defeated the Polish king and his Saxon allies in 1702. Charles's subsequent march on Moscow met with initial success, but the campaign ended with disaster when the Swedish army suffered heavy losses to a Russian force more than twice its size at Poltava in 1709, and marked the downfall of the Swedish Empire. Charles had been shot in the foot prior to the battle at Poltava, and as he was chased by the Russian forces, he spent the following 5 years in exile in the Ottoman Empire, trying to rule Sweden through his sister, Ulrika Eleonora the Younger. His plan was to get the Ottomans to join him in a last effort to defeat the Russians. In 1713, Russia occupied Finland. Charles agreed to leave Constantinople after he failed to get the Ottomans to join him against Russia. In 1714 he returned to Stralsund. From there he arrived in Sweden in 1715. A few months later he attacked Norway in an attempt to force Denmark to withdraw from Scania. He occupied the capital of Christiania, today's Oslo, but after suffering significant losses of men and materiel, Charles was forced to retreat. In 1718, Charles once more invaded Norway. With a main force of 40,000 men, he laid siege to the fortress of Fredrikstad. While in the trenches close to the perimeter of the fortress on the 11th of December 1718, Charles was struck in the head by a projectile and was killed. The shot struck the left side of his skull and exited from the right. He died instantly. The invasion was abandoned, and Charles's body was returned to Sweden. During the march back to Sweden, around 4,000 men died during a blizzard.